Good morning.
Morning.
Enjoying listening to you guys talk. Thought maybe you you guys could just take it away. I would just sit back with the camera off this morning and listen to you guys talk about your animals.
It's an important topic. Maybe we should add that to the questions later.
Well, we've done the dog run call in the past, and if anyone's curious about protocol for running with your dog, I don't know anybody who runs with their cat, but I'm sure somebody does. Yeah, check that out because there's some really good information in there.
We just adopted a puppy on Saturday. So she is like 3 months and we're just getting used to, having an animal. We haven't ever had one. My boys are terrified of her, even though, they're bigger than her and everything, but she's like still learning not to jump on that. She's just an excited little puppy. But yeah, I'm like, I can tell she's going to be a big girl. We adopted her. They think an Aussie Shepherd and yellow lab mix. So I think she's going to be like a good trail dog, but being patient.
That's awesome. Yeah, we have an Australian Shepherd. She's okay on the trails. She's pretty lazy, honestly, but maybe that's just because, I don't know, we've kind of molded her into more of a house dog. But I think that's so cool. Yeah, I saw those pictures. They must have been on your Instagram, Sarah. Yeah, gosh. Just get ready for some disrupted sleep patterns now. That's part of the process, but it'll be worth it.
Yeah, I feel like really thankful.
Time is here and we're all coming out of our seasonal depression. It's time to add another responsibility. Perfect time.
Well, I said, I took a lot of time off for my post-race recovery. I'm like, this is what happens when I don't get my daily dopamine hits. Like all of a sudden I'm like, I need a big feeling. Give me a dog.
Right. Yeah. And Drew, perfect week too. As I know, like so many athletes and it hasn't been too bad for me, fortunately, but that time change can be like pretty challenging to deal with. But maybe this is the last time we're going to have to deal with that when the world finally wakes up and realizes that it's better for all of our mental health and well-being to get those extra hours of sunlight towards the end of the day. So my fingers are crossed that we see that past the house here. We can finally do away with that. Well, I guess we'll get to it here. Forewarning, I'm a little distracted today because I've got people working downstairs on my ceiling, and for the last 2 days, our HVAC system's been broken. It's involved ripping drywall out and whatnot. And so if I have to take a quick pause to make sure that something's going right down there, I apologize ahead of time. Hopefully it's not too disruptive. But yeah, we're going to talk about crewing and pacing primarily on this call. I don't know. Oh, there's Kylie. Cool. And Kristen, she should be here also. Zoe's not going to make it today. But yeah, we had a really great question from one of our athletes, Dale, super cool guy. Obviously good runner, great runner, but also wants to be like a great pacer and a great crew member. And I think I really like that. I like that perspective because I think as we're all athletes, but we're all also involved in this thing where like these races are a big collaboration. We've talked about this a lot before. You're kind of racing against yourself out there. We're using that infinite mindset. There are competitors, but we're trying to execute our race. And sometimes when we're racing, especially when we're going long, it involves getting the help of a lot of other people. I know like Kylie's here, Kristen and Drew, they've all crewed, and myself, we've all crewed for Zoe in her long races. And just, I think, at least for me, I'm starting to understand like how important, just having a strong dial crew is. And so, and also that kind of, when I say crew, I mean pacers as well, right? Because they're playing a really important role in this. Really wanted to kind of get into that, at least for the majority of this call, and kind of see where it goes. So the question is, my friend and running buddy is running Western States, and he asked me to be on his crew and to pace him. This will be the first time that I do either of these things. I know every runner is unique in their needs and wants during the race, and that the race will bring on new challenges and problems that were not expected. My question is, as a crew member and pacer, what are some things that you have learned from various races that can help you prepare your runner and yourself? As someone who has had a crew and pacers before, what are some things that you have come to expect or ask for in order to better your help out there and achieve your race goals? As a pacer, how do you holistically, and by holistically, he mentions mentally, emotionally, and physically, prepare yourself to take care of yourself and your runner while you're out there pacing and crewing? Such good questions. Do you have some follow-ups as well? So yeah, I'm excited to dive in. Sarah, maybe we'll start with you. I always want to start with you because I know that your time's a little limited, but more so because you are just coming off of like a pretty big effort, 24-hour race. And I know that involved having a crew. And so like, just as like on the athlete side, what kind of advice did you give to your crew? What little tips? How did you like work on just kind of cueing them into what your needs might be out there?
So I have one woman who has crewed me now for 3 events. So we're like in it, we're dialed. She knows me very well. So like some of that, like, I have that foundation with her. So like, I didn't have any pacers or anything. It was just her. But for both Bryce, Canyon, where she crewed me for 100, and then this one where she crewed me for a 24-hour, I like made her a document. So for Bryce Canyon, it was like every aid station that she was going to see me. I put what I needed from her physically, like take my trash, have ready 2 soft flasks, 4 gels, and these layers. And then I would have some like questions for her to ask me. So things that I might not think, when you're out there, you don't necessarily, you're not accessing your whole brain. So like you might come into the aid station and forget all of the things that you're supposed to tell your crew. So she has these prompts, how are your layers? Are you feeling hot? Do you think we need to change your shoes? Do you want music? And things like that. So I have it like, I know what I need. And so I did a lot of the reflection and then put that out there for her. So like, I do think it's the runner. I do believe like a pacer or crew should feel comfortable asking their runner questions like, what do you need from me? What sorts of things can I say to you? What do you not want me not to say? One time I had a woman start running with me and like a 1/4 mile in, she was like, we can turn around if you want. So like now I tell everybody like, hey, never, ever tell me that I can give up. Like, I don't want to hear that. That's not helpful. Right. But I didn't know that before. So now I know it. So I think asking your runner questions like, what do you think you're going to want? What sorts of things motivate you? What are your goals? And then taking into account what time of day you're going to be seeing your runner and like where they're going to be in the course. Like, are they fresh early on? Is it, in the night and it's mile 70? Like, that's going to change, right? Like maybe you're going to really want to be practicing your power hiking and just like walking in silence with somebody in the middle of the night. Like those are the skills that you're going to be honing. You don't need to worry about your speed. But if you've got somebody who's like trying to podium and you're with them early on, then like, yeah, maybe you're, so I think you need to explore with the runner what their expectations are.
Yeah, that's awesome. And such a great place to start off the conversation. I think that it is really important to recognize something that you mentioned here, Sarah, which is that you as the athlete, you took the time to reflect on what you thought your needs would be out there, and then you reiterated them to your crew and to your pacer. And I think that's huge. But we all, as athletes, kind of have like our own way of communicating. I know we've talked a lot about communication on previous calls when it has to do with kind of other aspects of a running life or an athletic life. And so really owning kind of like that like the importance of communication here. Don't assume your pacer or your crew is going to be able to anticipate your needs unless you've kind of explicitly mentioned to them some of the things that might be helpful to you, or at least giving them some like starting off points. And so that's kind of what I was hearing from you, Sarah, giving people like, here are the things that motivate me. Here are my goals. Here's what I don't want you to say. And kind of, offering those really clear directions can be really helpful.
Just real quick, I think also exploring fears is like a really good thing to talk about. What are you afraid? Like knowing what your runner is afraid of and what they're worried about. So you can, like I'm really worried about getting sick because I've gotten so sick historically in running. So she's so good about keeping me eating and like congratulating me on eating and like telling me, like I'm a dog, like you're doing such a good job eating solid foods at this point, but like exploring those fears, I think is important too. And like runners might not be eager to talk about those. So it could be a good thing to ask them.
Yeah, I'd agree too, because I think that a lot of, just complexity can kind of arise later in a race, especially as you mentioned, we're talking about 24-hour events. It's pretty rare in like a 50 miler to have a pacer, but you might be able to have crew. I personally, as an athlete, I try to have crew at whatever race I can. Whether it's a marathon or, I haven't done 100 miles, but 50 miles, marathon on up. If I can have a crew, I'm going to do it because that means I don't have to carry as much stuff. And as long as I very clearly tell, my crew members where to be at what time and what to give me, I generally am setting myself up for success, trying to take some variables and things off of my plate, put them on other people who want to support me. And that kind of, at least for me, that's really helpful. I also think that as an athlete, another thing that's really helpful about having like the crew in the pacers is like the motivational factors there that, Sarah kind of like addressed a little bit. When you get to see your friends or people who are supporting you along the way, those kind of like guideposts, I think can be really helpful. I consider that to be almost like process oriented because for me, I get to focus on like that next crew point. And that sometimes when I get into an aid station, I will change my attitude, change my body language, all of this stuff. And it can help to kind of like switch things up in the moment. But anyways, like back to, kind of like this longer stuff. And we're asking people, what are their expectations? What are, what does the athlete expect of the crew? All of that. I think it really differs from person to person. So again, like that communication is going to be really, really vital. Hey, Drew, when you, gosh, I wish you had been there to crew Zoe the last time around, because I would love to just reflect a little bit on the preparedness and the difference between that first the first time Zoe, and I wish she was here too, did her 100, and then the next time, which was the Rio del Lago race, and what some of the differences were there. But when I recall some of the preparation process behind this, it's really similar each time. As the athlete, she really is providing the crew and the pacers with a pretty detailed spreadsheet that says where she's going to be at what time, and whether, and specifically the locations that you can crew at, and a GPS coordinate to get there, which is really helpful in these long races because you're driving all over the place to try to find where you're going to meet your athletes. So it's GPS, the time, and what she needs in terms of food and fuel. But the other thing that I noticed that she was putting on her spreadsheets at Rio del Lago was what to ask her in those specific moments. So she was going through this reflective period before the race where she was thinking at mile 20, what am I going to be feeling like? What might I be feeling? She was really going through that visualization process, thinking about these things ahead of time. Okay, here are some things that might be really helpful for someone to ask me, or this is the attitude that I want my crew to have at this moment. Yeah, Drew, I don't know if you recall her doing any of that at Leadville. I personally don't remember, but yeah, I'm just curious, kind of what your insights might be.
I have so many things to say on this topic. Zoe did an amazing job of preparing her pacers and her crew. And I like to say, I hate saying pacer or crew, because to me, they're two completely different things. For example, I'm a really good pacer. In the moment, I'm fit, I'm confident, I'm capable, I'm positive influence. I study courses. I know where things are at. I'm a really good pacer. I'm a good communicator. But to be honest, I don't think I'm a great crewer. I get tired late at night. I'm not great with logistics. There's a lot of things that don't necessarily cross over from pacer to a crew member. With Zoe specifically, her at Leadville, that was the first time I've gotten an opportunity to pace someone for a 100-mile event. Granted, I think I only ended up running 16 or 18 miles or something like that, but I learned so much from Zoe. And one of the things was that as a runner, you can assemble your pacers and your crew, but it's still your job to educate them and not just communicate your needs and stuff like Sarah was discussing, but also like you discussed, TJ, with her other successful 100-mile attempt. You have to create that spreadsheet, give addresses, latitudes, longitudes, where aid stations are at, where you need them. You have to put so much work into it. You can't just be like, well, you're my pacer and you're my crew, and this is the race, show up on race day and let's get it done. That's not fair to your pacers. It's not fair to your crew, and it's not fair to you, right? You're not setting everyone else up for success. So Zoe taught me how much effort and time and work goes in for a runner to educate their pacers, to educate their crew and get them prepared for race day. And then taking responsibility for it, knowing that on race day, you, just like you mentioned, TJ, you've unloaded all of the management stuff. You did your due diligence up front, you're done, you don't have to worry about it anymore. And you've assembled a super crew, a piping hot crew, so to speak, to take over and get it all going. So that was really, really cool for me to experience. But yeah, just knowing, not to back up too far, but knowing that a pacer and a crew member can be the same, right? That's awesome. But a lot of times, in my opinion, sometimes people are better at pacing, have them pace. Sometimes people are better at crewing, have them crew, and don't feel like you have to have the same person do everything.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's just really vital, and you really were shining some good light on this, Drew, to recognize the differences between being a pacer and a crew member. When I think crew member, I think logistics. I think importance of being at a place on time so your athlete can really rely on you. You're not going to miss their run through that aid station. You're going to be there. You're going to be there a half an hour early. You're going to be there an hour early, whatever it takes. You're going to be there. You're going to be set up. Your stuff is going to be like all of the gear that you're anticipating your athletes needs. They've communicated to you some of the things that they might need. And so you're going to lay those out so they're really accessible. And then maybe you're going to have some like backup stuff. Maybe you've got the arm sleeves or a jacket. You don't know if they're going to want to change their shirt or their shoes. So you've got some backups there waiting for them. Super important. Like, we're going to anticipate that stuff. And then, that crew member should, and it's hard, but like, you got to try to be uplifting when you're there. You're asking them questions when they come in. And sometimes it depends on who your athlete is. But like, for example, most of the time when we're crewing Zoe, she'll just tell you what she needs because she's been thinking about it for 30 minutes before getting into that aid station. And so she's like, here's what I need, boom, boom, boom. Or, she'll be like, give me that bag that I told you to have ready. And so you just give it to her and then she goes. But on the other side of that, sometimes the longer these races go, the onus really becomes on the crew to kind of guide the athlete, because that cognition is just like, it's so much more limited when you've been running for so long. And so, then asking the athlete, like, have you been eating? And this is kind of, and what do you need? What's working for you? And this is where I think the bridge between crew and pacer is really important. We really noticed this at Rio del Lago when Zoe was out running. Someone like Kylie would be pacing her, and then Kylie would kind of be relaying to us, the crew, what Zoe's needs were going to be ahead of time, like maybe text us or something at the aid station so we could even switch things up in the moment. I know that I do feel, Drew, like you're totally right in mentioning, for me, crew is about like preparing the gear, being at the right place at the right time, and making sure the athlete leaves the aid station with the things that they need. The pacer's job is like so different, right? Because like, you're actually out there, you're doing the heavy lifting. You're either like trying to motivate, you're trying to like to have a conversation with the athlete to help distract them because it's like painful and they've been out there for a long time and they're dealing with a lot of emotions. But there's also, I think, times when the pacer just has to be quiet too and just run with the athlete or walk with the athlete, whatever it is. Yeah, Kylie, you want to jump in here and just talk about like that kind of like pacer aspect? I know Zoe, she told me about how great of a job you did pacing her at Rio del Lago. And I'm just curious if you've kind of got any insights on the pacer side of things.
I've done that. I've paced Zoe, and then I also paced another friend of mine in 100, and I wouldn't say I'm an expert. And actually, I feel like I put a lot of pressure on myself to I was like, oh my gosh, am I going to do a good enough job? And I think it's important to kind of keep perspective that that person is not thinking about that in the moment, and they just want someone to be there for them and support them if they're having some lows, etc. And I also found it helpful with Zoe and with the other person that I paced to just ask, do you need anything? Like every now and then just asking, what can I get you? Do you need anything? And then the hardest part for me was kind of like you were saying, figuring out what the best balance between talking and not talking is. And based on how that person is feeling, because they might not want you to talk, and you might feel like I need to talk or something, but Zoe did a good job of just being like, yeah, I'm gonna I'm just gonna listen to my music and chill right now. Or, you know, we would, at the beginning when I first picked her up, we were like having conversations, etc. And then she just kind of settled into it. So I think just knowing that, number one, you're there to like support that person, so don't put too much pressure on yourself, I guess. And they're not going to focus on that aspect. Number two, like, just, I would say, be respectful of the highs and lows that person's going through, because you know, they might not want you to talk, but you shouldn't take that personally. And if you're not sure if they want to talk or not, you know, you can always ask them. And then for me, I guess another piece that I forgot, that with Zoe and with this other person that I was pacing, I really focused on asking them about nutrition as well. Like, did you have your nutrition? Because, like, depending on when you're pacing someone, they might not be remembering that sort of thing. And that can be super helpful to them to like remember to get their calories in and stuff. And for Zoe too, she was like very like focused on getting in her, almost too focused on getting in the goo liquid shots. She had like I swear she had like 200 goo liquid shots in that race.
Okay. Like, she was like, I wish she was here, because she was, you know, just like, she felt like I was like not telling her.
I know.
You know, she got like really paranoid. It was so funny. She was like, you're withholding gels from me. And I'm like, no, I'm not. It's only been 10 minutes.
Yeah. And then I remember having to remind her to like actually drink things too, because she was really focused on the like calorie gel food thing, but like not as focused on the hydration. And I was like, no, we need to have like both, you know. And that's probably more of my like nutrition side of things. But yeah, that, and then the nutrition piece, and then Zoe was pretty good. The other person that I paced went through a lot of like emotions, and so being prepared for like some serious, like, you know, if somebody's crying, or you know, them maybe getting mad, but they're not really mad at you. It's just like the state of mind that they're in. So again, like, not taking things personally, and knowing that these kind of races can cause people to like have these maybe mental changes too.
Yeah. Awesome. And I think that it's just, I mean, we really heard a lot from you there. I think it's important to recognize, you know, the like just understanding the individual person that you're going to be pacing. You kind of, at least for me as a pacer, I feel there's an expectation that I have to entertain the athlete, because they've been out there for so long and they've been listening to their music, and like now they're with their pacer, and that means like we're going to talk about all these cool topics and whatnot. And like, I'm not like that really that conversational. And so like, I really struggle with that as a pacer. And so I think knowing your athlete, what their expectations are, and like, this is something at Rio del Lago, I think we all talked about, like, what does Zoe want to talk about out there? And I'm like, you know, like, here's some things that you could really get her going on, like, you know, these topics. But also like, you know, maybe those topics are like a little too deep and heavy for a race, but like maybe with the right person, that can be the right thing to like get them through like a long 20-mile stretch. You know, like when Sean was pacing her, I heard they had some pretty like real conversations, and I think that's cool. But like when I was pacing her, like we almost didn't talk at all. And so I think recognizing like kind of like trying to recognize where the athlete is with their mood, how they're feeling, what their focus level is, can be really important, and kind of give the pacer some cues. Also, like Kylie mentioned, the nutrition piece, really important. We are all athletes. So, you know, the athlete who asked this question is an athlete. Everybody on this call, you guys are athletes. Like, you've practiced your race day fueling. You've practiced your race day hydration. you know what it's like, and you can recognize what good fueling practices look like, right? I'm assuming you can, because you're doing them in all of your long runs. So if you need to, as a pacer, be aware of what your athlete's doing. You have to keep the time for them. If they're trying to eat every 20 minutes, is that something they told you to do? You're the timekeeper. Okay, it's been 20 minutes, Zoe, time for a gel. Make sure you get some water down with that. Make sure you get some electrolytes. There's not many electrolytes in those gels. Make sure you know. So that's your job. And you're out there kind of executing a program. It's your job to help your athlete reach their goals. And like, as the person who asked the question, you know, really made it clear, like, how can I help that athlete better achieve their goals? I think one of those things is keeping them honest and holding them to account for whether they're eating and fueling or not. And if they're having trouble fueling, trying to give them some ideas of some other stuff to eat at aid stations could be really helpful too. Yeah, maybe before I definitely have some thoughts about the holistic side for pacing and crewing, of how to take care of yourself on a long weekend of crewing and pacing, as you know, for the actual crew and pacers. But before that, I want to turn it to Kristen for a little bit, because she's got a lot of experience crewing and pacing too. And I'm curious what your insights are, Kristen.
Yeah, I love recapping all of Zoe's races. I feel like she's one of the most fun people to crew and pace for. Just because you never know. I mean, you know exactly what you're going to get. And it's like this super bubbly, uplifting, like fun experience. But that's not always the case. Sometimes your runner misses a cutoff and you kind of have to manage emotions and expectations and sort of like let them lean into the suck for a little bit. Like, these things happen. Happens at Leadville, happens at every 100-miler. But also I think, you know, I think just being there with your person is just physically being there to support your runner or athlete is probably the most important part. Before Zoe's Leadville race, I thought it would be a good idea to get like a wilderness first aid certification. Super glad I did. But it's come in handy. I'll just say that. But I also think that with other people that I've paced or crewed for, you know, asking questions ahead of time, having like a debrief or like a briefing before the race, sitting down, going through the spreadsheet again, making sure everyone actually understands, because it's one thing just to like send out a spreadsheet and be like, here's all the information, see you the weekend of, which is great. And like, that's, you know, I think that if that works for you and you have a dialed crew and pacer group, and you work together before, you kind of know what to expect. But if it's your first time pacing or crewing for anyone, you know, 2 nights before the race, the night before the race, sit down and go through the sheet with everyone and say, like, you know, here's 400 calories for like this drop bag. Here's, you know, 1,200 calories for this, however long in between the aid stations, and just make sure everyone's comfortable. Like, no questions are off limits. You know, like one time I asked, you know, like I was pacing my friend Jeremy. I was like, hey, Jeremy, if I accidentally gluten poison myself while I'm pacing you, do you want me to, you know, run off into the forest to go to the bathroom and then try to catch up? Or do you just want me to drop? Because I don't want to, obviously you don't want to hold your runner back. So even just having like silly conversations like that, which might seem silly, but like, I have celiac disease. That's my reality. I have to ask these questions. And just being open and honest with the answers, and making sure that everyone's expectations are on the same page. So I think that would be my biggest piece of advice, is just make sure everyone feels comfortable and everyone's expectations are managed.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think
underprepared, right?
What was, Drew, can you repeat that?
Oh, just that it's always better as a pacer or crew member to be over prepared and not under prepared. So like literally anything you can do, even if it seems like the wilderness first aid thing originally might've been like, that just seems a little excessive, but literally like it might've saved y'all's lives. Always over prepared, never under prepared.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Kristen, you did a really good job of kind of illuminating some of the other facets of being a pacer or a crew member that are really important. One is that like pre-race debriefing or like crew meetup. That's the opportunity as an athlete and as a crew member to like really dial things in. One, we're getting as an athlete, we're getting all the logistics out to the crew. We're letting people know what's expected of them, when they should be places, what they should have, kind of giving them an idea of like some of these things that Sarah mentioned, like here are the things that I'm motivated by. Here are some of my goals. Like here are the process-oriented goals that I'm going to be using. Here are maybe some of my performance goals that I'm looking to achieve if things go right. Here are like some of these different scenarios that might occur. And like in these long races, something that I see a lot of athletes have is they kind of have like an A, B, and C kind of like time goals for reaching aid stations. And unfortunately, like I don't like to put a lot of time on people, but when you have a crew meeting you at places, unfortunately, you have to kind of go through the process of figuring out how long you think it's going to take you to be at one place or another, and having like a spread of here's the best case scenario, here's probably what I'm going to do, here's maybe if I'm having a tough time. That can be really, really helpful. The other thing that I'm hearing is like just picking your team, just picking that crew and your pacers is a really important process. Like I know for Zoe, she has spent a lot of time kind of like going through, who are people that I want to run with? Who are the people that I would prefer to rely on to be, in the pit with the gear in the right places at the right time? And she really looks to like match up a specific person with how she's going to be feeling at a certain point of the race. And like all of these things, she really takes it to a pretty high level of detail. But that's kind of like what I think is necessary if you really want to like put your team together. I know a lot of other athletes do that as well. I think also something that was kind of just mentioned in the chat box, I don't want to gloss over, the importance of like whether the pacer runs in front or behind of the athlete. I always like to ask the runner, like, hey, do you want me to like be out front pushing the pace, or, do you want to like kind of dictate, where we're at? And like, I remember when I paced Zoe at Rio del Lago, for a lot of the time, I went just behind her because she, wanted to move at a pace that she was comfortable at. But then when we got to like that last 6 miles, she kind of was like, go out in front and push the pace, because I want to like, go as hard as I can for these last miles. It's going to help me to like tractor beam on your feet and just go at your pace. So like asking that and being really clear and explicit, whether you're the pacer or the runner, kind of reiterating that to your athlete is really important. The other thing that Kristen mentioned that I think is huge is just being prepared as that crew or that pacer. Again, we're all athletes. Like there's an expectation that we know what we're doing when we're getting into this, whether that's like recognizing whether a person has good nutrition, habits out there, or whether they're like starting to like not feel good and being able to help problem solve with them. I mean, you're part of that person's team. And so there is going to be an expectation that you help them with that, especially if they're asking for it. So, and Kristen mentions always carry a space blanket, maybe too. You just never know. I think it's super important just to be prepared in case you have to spend an extended period of time out and it's cold and it's wet. So yeah, I think I want to kind of move the conversation along here a little bit. Talk about like how crew and pacers can prepare themselves mentally, physically, emotionally. At least for me, like a weekend of crewing and pacing is like a weekend of that's it. That's what I'm doing. Even as an athlete, somebody who wants to run as much as they can and to train, when I'm crewing and pacing somebody, like I'm not training that weekend. I'm not doing my runs. I'm not asking my coach to do if I can do a lot of runs, because those weekends are really involved, and they are draining. I know, like for me, after the last few times I coached Zoe, like I was pretty tired the week after. And so, preparing for that ahead of time, kind of like talking to my coach about that, front loading my training week, getting a rest day in before I pace, really, really, really important. Yeah, I'm going to go back here to Drew and just see what your thoughts are on, like, just as a pacer or a crew member, just kind of preparing for the stress and the demands of doing that job.
Yeah. So I'm really big into kind of speaking things into existence. And so to mentally prepare for what could be a really positive experience or possibly a negative experience, depending on, how things go, but just kind of like mentally preparing yourself for different scenarios and how they might plan out. Maybe spend some time in I don't know if you want to call it meditation or not, but just really deep thought and thinking about, or spending time thinking about, what you're embarking off to do and what's the purpose of having you out there. And I don't know, just mentally preparing, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You'd mentioned that not training, I guess, throughout the weekend. I always like to treat my runner's race as like your race. Like, what would you do if you were also racing that weekend? Maybe start the week off with normal mileage, but you almost taper, right? You have to be healthy, you have to be fit, and you have to be fresh, because it's not just the physical stress that you're going to be putting on yourself as you're pacing, however far your runner has you do it. But there's a lot of mental stress that comes with pacing as well, that you almost have to hide deep down inside to give the illusion that everything is positive, whether it is or whether it isn't. And so we always talk about how stress is stress. We emphasize it all the time because it's true. So preparing your mind, preparing your body to experience what could be a high level of stress is important.
Yeah, thanks, Drew. And I think that mental preparation, kind of on the pacer crewing side, can sometimes get overlooked. I know, like in my experiences crewing, and pacing, like I crewed and did like all the logistics for Rio del Lago and then paced the final leg for Zoe. And like, that was really illuminating for me. I was like, that's too much. I can't do that again. That was like, I had nothing left. Like at the end of the day, I might as well have just run the 100, because that's kind of what I felt like after. And I think kind of like, making sure that your job, like as a pacer crew, is appropriate for you. Like Zoe and I are already planning Western States, and like, I'm not going to pace. One, I don't like that. I don't like pacing because I feel nervous. I'm going to do the wrong things for Zoe out there. And so like, I want to have one job. And so, when you've done these things a few times, you can start to like figure out what's best for you. And the mental preparation, like knowing what you're capable of and what you're not. Some things that I've seen just in being at these races is like pacers pacing absurdly long sections. Like, I'm going to pace 50 miles. I'm going to pace 30 miles. Why would you do that? I think that's a really poor choice for an athlete. I've seen some of my athletes do that. Keep the distances to reasonable things, like 20 miles. You don't need to put that kind of stress on your system. Your athlete, the onus is on them to find other people to do other legs. I think that there's so much like uplifting that the crew and the pacer needs to do to help the athlete make the distance, that if you put all of that volume on them too, it can be like just a recipe for like multiple weeks of just being really tired and not feeling like yourself. At least it has for me. So I really try to avoid that and tell my athletes to set reasonable goals when they're pacing. I would also mention that I think it's really important if you're going to be pacing somebody, try to get like away from the race for a little while if you can. Try to get a nap in. Especially if you're doing an overnight shift, you know you're going to be missing out on sleep. One of the things that you can do to prepare yourself for that is to like really rest ahead of time. And I know that can be really hard because you want to get to every spot and you want to see how your runner's doing. But trust that the rest of the crew is doing their job, and they can update you closer to when it's time for you to run. That way you get the rest that you need. And that goes for after your pacing too. I think that it's totally acceptable for a pacer to want to like go back to their hotel and rest. And again, just trust that the rest of the crew is doing the job that they're assigned to do. They're going to do it really well. And that you've put in your effort and you've done what you can. And now, you need to take care of yourself as well. How about, let's go. Yeah, Drew.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. We've all seen that as a runner, like getting into longer distances, especially when it's overnight, like we aren't sharp mentally. Like some people see things, they hear things that may not exist. There's just, your brain isn't working at 100% capacity. And like TJ said, as a pacer, like myself, I'll just use myself as an example because I'm sure others are like me. I have to sleep. Like I have to have sleep at night or I don't function. If you as a pacer are so worked up in an overnight, race where someone's going to be running for 20, 24 longer hours, and you're just like, well, I'm amped. Like I'm going to be there the whole time. You also aren't giving your brain really the opportunity to take the rest it needs so that you can think sharply whenever your runner isn't. That can really get you into some dangerous spots later in the race when your runner needs you to be 100% mentally. And so please, like TJ said, so important to get rest when you can. An hour nap here, an hour nap there, wherever you can, but please get rest when you can.
Yeah, thank you. I remember crewing Zoe at Leadville, and I was driving your truck, Kristin, to meet Zoe somewhere, and I was nodding off at the wheel, and I just like had to pull over on the side of this remote road and sleep for 35 minutes because I could no longer keep my eyes open. And it just got to be unfortunately, a really dangerous situation that I regret, but I've learned a lot from. As pacers and crew, we have to take care of ourselves. We have to get the naps in. Kylie, what do you think on a nutritional side? I know Drew mentioned yes, as a pacer, you've got to eat and drink too. But when we're talking about these long stretches of time, especially the race starts at 5 a.m., I'm going to be pacing at 10 p.m. What can an athlete do to nourish themselves to stay up with their fueling while they're moving around and there's all this other stuff happening?
I think it's important to kind of stick to your regular, trying to stick as closely as possible to your regular eating pattern in regards to still getting in meals. And then you can always pack stuff, pack meals or pack snacks, things that you're used to eating too. So you guys kind of mentioned stress on the body with the pacing. If you change up your nutrition a lot, that can be stressful on the body as well. So trying to keep some familiar snacks, or if you go to a coffee shop or a restaurant, try to get things that you're familiar with rather than something totally new or, fatty or something that you might not be used to. Keeping in mind timing before your actual, if you are pacing shift, because you don't want to eat a really big heavy thing within an hour, probably hour to 2 hours. And then that hydration piece, I think, can't be overstated. I think it's really easy to get caught up in what's going on and with the other person, the racer, and you're not, like Drew said, you're maybe not taking care of yourself. So got to make sure that you're regularly hydrating and kind of maybe carry your normal water bottle, have an electrolyte supplement with you, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Kristen, what are your insights? You know, I feel like you're really holistically minded, and I know you think a lot about taking care of yourself before getting out on these big adventures. Crewing and pacing, I feel like, is a big adventure. What are the kind of things that you're looking to do for yourself to keep you feeling good so you're ready to do your job out there?
I think managing expectations is number one. Like the weekend is not about me. Like it is an honor to be asked to pace or crew someone for a big event. And I think keeping that in mind and knowing that like I'm gonna bend over backwards for any one of my friends, no matter what. Um, the week and weekend of a big race, like no exceptions, I am there for them. The only reason I would ever leave or not be connected is if like my dog got run over, something terrible would have to happen for me to get pulled out of like the mental state that you need to be in. But I also think that just reminding yourself that this is fun. We are choosing to do this, hold your own training lightly, because it's going to be reciprocated when you have a big race or when you need support for a big run, and making sure that fun is kind of the theme of the weekend, or the event, because I know it's like super cliche to say, but like if you're not having fun, why are you doing it? Zoe would hate me for saying that, but it's true. I mean, everyone gets along, everyone has fun, everyone's helping each other out. And when it comes to you specifically as an athlete pacing or crewing, you need to be dialed. You need to have your nutrition, you need to have your hydration, you need to, take your naps. Like I feel like it's a very fine line between like prioritizing yourself and prioritizing someone else. But you have to manage both, and you have to have fun while you're doing it. It's not like you have to have fun as like it's I feel like the way I'm saying that makes it seem like it would be difficult to do, but it's not. Like it's just such a cool experience and event. And again, just like such an honor to be asked to be there for something so huge for one of your friends. So, manage your expectations. If you got a long training run that you wanted to do that weekend, sorry, this is more important. Go have fun. I don't know. Be there for your friend. Be a good person.
Yeah, if we're
Yeah.
giving a lot of advice here, and so the person that asked this question, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, had said that they hadn't done either before. They haven't paced and they haven't crewed. And so something that might be helpful for this person is have that conversation with your athlete or with your runner, sorry, and tell them, my first time, like I'm going to be there for you, but maybe I would like to take a smaller section or a smaller chunk, so that you don't feel so much pressure on yourself of having to like do everything perfect when you're kind of inexperienced. Get the experience, but maybe just a small chunk at a time. Instead of pacing 20 miles of this run, maybe 10, maybe something small, so you can be better next time and grow and develop as a pacer or a crew member.
I think to that point, a really important thing too that I and one of my pacers kind of learned the hard way is just because you've done the distance before you have to take into account how long am I going to be out there. So I had a woman pace me last year who's a super fast road marathoner. So I knew she could do 25 miles. She does that no problem. Well, we were out there for 8 hours because I was walking for those 25 miles, more or less. And she really, her cortisol level, she had never experienced anything like that before. And so it's not just, can I do this distance, but like, how many hours am I being expected to exercise? And is that something that I have done before?
Yes. I mean, you guys have all, I think, really, just come up with some great information here, some good tips. Sarah, that was awesome. So important to recognize on the athlete side, like who are you asking to pace you, and to be, like Drew said, be really honest about your experience. Be really honest about like how comfortable you feel. I always question, when I have an athlete who's pacing, more than 20 miles in an event. One, I don't feel like that's advantageous for the athlete. That's a lot of time when you're tired with the same person. Could be better to mix it up, have multiple different athletes. It's a lot of pressure on somebody to pace 50 miles. Yeah, it might feel really cool. Like, I'm going to pace 50 miles. Like, yeah, it's an honor to be out there. You're totally right, Kristen. It's about, trying to rise up and support your athlete and do what they need to be done so they can be successful. But again, knowing your own self, your limitations, that awareness of self, really vital. You will never see me pacing someone for 50 miles. I know that is way too much for me, mentally and emotionally, more than anything. And so I'm not going to put that on myself, or I'm not going to put that strain on my athlete either, or my partner, because sometimes I'm pacing Zoe and it's complicated. But I would definitely recommend that you guys, just take some time to think about how you're feeling, what your awareness of self is. I'm comfortable running 20 miles. I'm comfortable being out there for 8 hours. That's what how long Zoe thinks it's going to take to do this 20-mile section. And so I feel good with 8 hours. That's what I'm going to do. And then someone else can step in and get that next leg. And it's really important, I think, for the athlete to have like those fresh perspectives, different people to chat with, different people to help motivate them. It can be rather monotonous if it's the same person the whole time, in my opinion. But there's other opinions out there, which is totally cool. Yeah. Did anybody want the last word on this? I think we've really covered it. Okay. I see a lot of head nods. Well, great. Yeah. Thank you guys. Maybe just really quick to recap some of the important stuff, as the athlete, as the runner: communication of expectations, fears, motivations, what you want to get from your athlete, from your runners, and your supporting pacers and crewers. It's like super important, really vital. Make sure you're spending that time to communicate. As a pacer and crew, differentiate between your job. Are you crew? Are you logistics? Or are you running? Are you pacing? And make sure that you take the time to recognize the difference between those jobs, and also give yourself like the break that you're going to need to do your job well. So if you're pacing, maybe don't get up for that 5 a.m. start. Maybe prioritize your sleep, maybe get that nap in. Like Kylie mentioned, try to keep your nutrition somewhat regular and routine, and stay on top of your hydration. Really important. I'd also recommend, something that Drew said, some deep thinking and reflection before the race, trying to manage your own expectations. Really, really important. Again, it, like Kristen mentioned, so important. It's an honor to be a part of somebody's crew, to be a pacer, to be a supporter. None of these things are done as like solo attempts. Even if you don't want a crew, even if you don't want a pacer, it's still a collaboration out there. All the volunteers, the race directors, the people who put this stuff together, it can't be done without them. Can't be done in my opinion, can't be done without crew. And so, think about that. If you're the athlete, think about that and what your role is if you're on the crew as well. And I hope you guys found this informative. We will, be back on next Friday. Thank you guys. Have a good weekend. Thanks for everybody's input. I really appreciate it. Bye.